Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Psych Talk, the podcast where we break down mental health topics, human behavior, and the psychology behind why we think, feel, and act the way we do. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating things in the entire universe, the human brain. It's very complex, powerful, and literally running the show 24/7, even when you're sleeping. So, whether you are a psych student or just a curious person or someone who wants to understand themselves better, stick around because this episode is for you. So, let's get into it. Let's start at the top. Your brain is divided into different areas, and each one of them has a job to do. Some are responsible for thinking and decision making, while others control movement, emotions, or your ability to see and hear. The biggest part of your brain is the cerebrum, and it's split into four main lobes. Kind of like departments in a company, each handling different tasks. So we have the frontal lobe, we have the parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. Let's get into each one of them. So the frontal lobe is like the CEO of the brain. It's located in front of the brain, right behind your forehead, and its functions are decision making, problem solving, planning, voluntary movement via the motor cortex, impulse control, emotional regulation, and speech production. Because there is the Broca's area, which is located in the frontal lobe, specifically in the left hemisphere. Let me give you an example of how the frontal lobe can work or how it works. So, for example, when you're studying for an exam and ignoring instructions, your frontal lobe is working hard. Or let's say you are on a diet and there is a piece of cake in front of you and you're saying no to it. You're like, no, I'm not gonna eat that piece of cake because I am on a diet. Your frontal lobe is working because he's controlling that impulse. So let's say you have a damage here, like, from a traumatic injury. It can affect personality and make someone more impulsive or disinhibited. Another example could be choosing whether to study for an exam or binge watch a show. So your frontal lobe is helping you to weigh the pros and cons and also deciding how to respond to a rude comment. So it helps you pause instead of react impulsively. Your frontal lobe helps you also creating, for example, a 5-year plan or organizing a road trip itinerary, or making a to-do list for your day, or breaking a big task into smaller steps. Also, again, resisting the urge to buy something expensive when you're budgeting. The same thing with like eating if you're on a diet. So it's also holding you back from interrupting someone in a conversation, keeping you calm during a disagreement instead of yelling, talking yourself down from anxiety before a big presentation, or figuring out how to fix a jammed printer right before class starts, coming up with a new way to explain a concept to a confused friend. It's also responsible for tapping, writing, walking, and all starting the primary motor cortex of the frontal lobe. Also, learning how to play a new instrument or perfecting a dance move, forming full sentences while speaking or writing, trying to find the right words to explain your thoughts, or knowing when you have talked too much and letting someone else speak, feeling embarrassed after making a mistake in public, and that awareness, comes from here. Also, remembering a phone number just long enough to dial it, or holding a thought in your head while doing mental math. And that is why if someone experiences damage to their frontal lobe, the entire personality can change. So someone can go from being very responsible and polite to being very impulsive and inappropriate after, an accident to the frontal lobe. Okay, enough of the frontal lobe. Now let's go into the parietal lobe. So the parietal lobe is the senses hub. It's located in the top middle of the brain, and the functions are to process sensory information like touch, temperature, pain, pressure. The parietal lobe is also responsible for spatial awareness and navigation, and it also integrates visual input for action. Example, reaching for an object. So let me give you an example. Let's say you touch a hot stove and instantly pull your hand back. Well, the fact that you pull your hand back, it's basically your parietal lobe processing the pain and the heat. And another example could be feeling the softness of a blanket or the rough texture of sandpaper. That's your parietal lobe working through the somatosensory cortex. We also have the body awareness again. So let's say you're closing your eyes and you're still able to touch your nose with your fingers. That's your parietal lobe working. Or walking through a narrow hallway without bumping into the walls, or reading a map or knowing which directions to turn while driving, walking upstairs in the dark without tripping, figuring out how to pack a grocery bag so everything fits perfectly. Also, doing mental math or estimating how much a tip should be at a restaurant, or comparing prices while shopping and figuring out what's the better deal. And also reading a sentence and understanding where one word ends and another begins, writing letters and spacing them correctly on a line, noticing something in your peripheral vision, like a ball flying towards you, and being aware of your surroundings while walking through a busy street. And so again, the parietal lobe processes touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. It helps you know where your body is, so it supports spatial thinking, navigation, and proprioception, and it also plays a role in math, reading, and understanding space. And now we have the temporal lobe, which is hearing and memory. It's located near the temples, so the sides of the brain, and its functions are auditory processing, so hearing, language comprehension, so where the Wernicke's area is, memory, especially forming long-term memories via the hippocampus, and also emotion processing, thanks to the amygdala. And so an example could be recognizing a song or remembering someone's voice uses your temporal lobe. And then if you have damage to the temporal lobe, it may cause you trouble understanding language. It's responsible for listening to someone speak and understanding what they're saying, or reading a sentence and grasping its meaning as well. Or remembering your first day of school or what you had for breakfast, learning a friend's birthday, or recalling a childhood song, feeling fear when you hear a sudden loud noise, because this is where the amygdala lives, feeling warmth and nostalgia when you hear your mom's voice or a comforting song from childhood, seeing someone you know and instantly recognizing them, even if you haven't seen them in years, watching a movie and recognizing the actor from another show you like, and because it's also responsible for facial recognition, or also telling if someone is being sarcastic or sincere, even if the words are the same, because it's responsible for interpreting the tone of voice, and also for detecting sadness, anger, or excitement in someone's voice. And last but not least, we have the occipital lobe, which is the vision central. So it is located at the back of the brain, and its functions are visual processing, so color, shape, motion, and depth. And some examples can be seeing a tree and recognizing that it is a tree, not just a green and brown blur, or watching someone wave at you and understanding the movement, choosing between a red apple and a green one, appreciating the difference between shades of blue in the sky and the ocean, noting that a car is coming from the corner of your eye, following a fast moving soccer ball during a game, interpreting a traffic sign or our emoji, pouring water into a cup without spilling it, catching a ball by judging how far and fast it's moving, and what happens if the occipital lobe is damaged? Well, the eyes are fine, but the brain can't process vision, and so you can have visual hallucinations, so seeing things that aren't there, inability to recognize objects or words, or color blindness as well. Yeah. And so these are our four lobes in the cerebral cortex. And again, the frontal lobe is responsible for decision making, problem solving, voluntary movement, planning. The parietal lobe is responsible for processing sensory information, spatial awareness, and navigation. The temporal lobe is responsible for auditory processing, language comprehension, memory, emotion processing. The occipital lobe is responsible for visual processing, color, shape, motion, and depth. And so now let's get into other important parts of the brain. So we're gonna go deeper, and so we're gonna go into the subcortical structures and the brainstem areas. So at the base near the brainstem, we have the cerebellum, which is its function is basically balance and coordination, smooth, precise movements, and motor learning, like learning to ride a bike. So, example, if you're dancing or playing a piano or riding a scooter, the cerebellum keeps you coordinated and upright. Then we have the brainstem, which is vital life support, and it's made up of the midbrain, the pons, the medulla, and basically its functions is breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, sleep-wake cycles, reflexes like coughing and swallowing. And the reason you keep breathing while you sleep is because your medulla it's doing what it's supposed to do. Then we have the limbic system, which is basically emotion, memory, and motivation. And it's where the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the thalamus are. So, what is the amygdala? Well, the amygdala is the emotion center, so especially for fear and aggression. So, it activates if you sense fear, like if you see a snake or hear a scary noise. The hippocampus is responsible for memory formation, so it helps you remember a friend's birthday or what you have studied last night. The hypothalamus regulates hunger, thirst, and temperature, and also hormones, and it connects the brain to the endocrine system via the pituitary gland. And so, example, it tells your body you're hungry or makes you sweat when you're hot. And then we have the thalamus, which is basically sends sensory information to the correct cortical area. So an example could be it directs sound information to the auditory cortex in the temporal lobe. And then we have the corpus callosum. So this is a thick band of nerve fibers connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. So allows basically the left and right sides of the brain to communicate. And again, it's basically dividing the right brain and left brain. And it's making sure that the two hemispheres are working together. So now I'm gonna get into the left brain and the right brain. So the left brain is basically for language, logic, and math. The right brain is for creativity, spatial skills, facial recognition. But we actually use both hemispheres together most of the time, so it's not really a clean divide. And so now let me give you a quick summary so that you can put everything all together. So the brain is a control center of the body and is divided into two halves by the corpus callosum. So we have the right and the left hemispheres. Each side of the brain has different strengths, so the left side is usually responsible for logic, language, and math, while the right side handles creativity, emotions, and spatial awareness. The brain is also made up of four main lobes: the frontal lobe, which helps with decision making, problem solving, movement, and personality; the parietal lobe, which processes touch, pain, temperature, and helps you know where your body is in space; the temporal lobe, which manages hearing, memory, and language; the occipital lobe, which processes everything you see, the colors, motion, and shapes. Inside the brain, we also have deeper structures like the limbic system, which controls emotions and memories. The amygdala is part of the limbic system and is in charge of fear and strong emotions, while the hippocampus helps you form and store memories. The hypothalamus controls hunger, thirst, body temperature, and hormones, and the thalamus works like a relay station, sending messages between the senses and the brain. And that was the limbic system. And then we also have the cerebellum, which is located at the back of the brain and it controls balance and coordination. And then we have the brainstem, which connects the brain to the spinal cord and keeps you alive by managing things like breathing, heartbeat, and digestion. And so all these parts work together to help you think, feel, move, remember, and stay alive. And this is the end of the episode. So if you like this episode, share with someone who's always wondered what their brain is really up to. And remember, every time you learn something new, your brain literally changes. So you're growing it right now. And until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and take care of that amazing brain of yours. And thank you.